Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to the show. Today's guest we have on the owner of Herban Wellness, Katya Difani. Katya's got a bachelor's in herbal science and has been using that degree to help the Kirkland area stay healthy for 10 plus years now. She has just got an amazing, immense knowledge on herbs and supplements and has that willingness to share it with us. So really enjoying this conversation, and I always go to Katya for my supplement needs, and so she's just an immense amount of knowledge. So really excited to chat with her. Hope you guys enjoy the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to Journey of the Modern Yogi. Today, my guest is Katya Difani. That's pronounced your last name right? Yeah, hell yeah. I was making sure. Yeah, I know. I've had some guests on before that I'm like, okay, I should have asked how you pronounce your name before I get you on here. Okay, good note to self. Didn't, but took a shot in the dark and it worked.
It worked.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much, Katya, for being on.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Katya is, among many things, the owner of Herban Wellness down in downtown Kirkland. And Herban Wellness is a supplement store, also just like a medicine shop, more or less. I mean, it's like an apothecary. Mm-hmm. It's my one-stop shop for just getting all the vitamins and stuff that I need in life and making me feel like a human being.
Awesome.
Yeah. So love your store. And through shopping at your store, I've gotten to know you a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And so you've come out to some of the events that we've had here at our house with our sound baths. Mm-hmm. And just, so it's really nice to get to know you outside of the store and Absolutely. Outside of this retail, merchant place that you have mm-hmm. that just serves the community beautifully.
Thank you.
So, God, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you agreeing to be on.
Yeah. Well, I love both you and Monica. You've always been lights when you've arrived in my shop. So
it's so
been
much.
Really my pleasure to get to know you guys better.
Yeah. And you've done so much for me personally with my help and my vitamins mm-hmm. and my supplements. I remember going into your store and buying generic supplements, which, mm-hmm. Is what it is, multivitamins and things like that. But then actually starting a conversation with you and be like, hey, this is what I'm looking mm-hmm. to do. This is what I'm trying to accomplish as a human mm-hmm. being. I've talked about this on either this show or other podcasts about my degradation of my mentality through my youth, whether through recreational activities or whatever it mm-hmm. was. And now that I'm a little clearer-minded in my adult years, how do I help to get that cognitive reasoning and response back? Mm-hmm. And so you have been just a blessing to me because not only are you giving me the things that really help, but you're taking the time to explain it to me.
Awesome.
And that's, the why is so much better for me than just the take this and shut mm-hmm. up. Mm-hmm. Trust me, it'll be fine.
Absolutely.
So So where'd your path start? I mean, you've clearly you've been doing this for a while. Mm-hmm. You're so learned in what you do. So mm-hmm. where did you start with all this?
Well, it's interesting. I get asked that question a lot, and I go back to my childhood, honestly, because I was fortunate enough to grow up on a ranch in Montana.
Oh, beautiful! What part?
And northwest Montana,
north
of Missoula,
Big Skies,
Flathead Lake. Yes,
awesome. Definitely.
Yeah. Grew up kind of in prairie land, but with mountain ranges in view. And
beautiful.
Yeah. And, like growing up on a ranch doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be like super nature connected. But fortunately, my mother is very much an earth being.
Yeah.
She would have loved to be a pioneer woman. That's kind of how she started out. So like my mom had a huge vegetable garden and a milk cow, and we raised cattle. We had sheep, goats, llamas, like chickens, horses, it was like just a paradise to grow up in really as a kid, wide open spaces. But my mom also brought this element of real reverence for the land and the earth. And both my parents are really committed to like sustainably managing the land.
Okay.
Which is not common anymore, which is unfortunate. Yeah. So my worldview was very much like, hiking, camping, being a part of nature, really intimately connected to it, and seeing the cycles of life and death,
totally.
And birth, literally.
The naturality of it, totally.
Yeah, with all these animals, and then my mom was really interested in Native American culture and spirituality, and our ranch happened no longer in our family, but the ranch is obviously still there, is on the Native American reservation, the Salish and Kootenai tribes.
Oh, beautiful.
Flathead.
Okay.
So my mom was really intrigued by their spirituality, which is so earth connected, right?
Yeah.
So we would go out harvesting like roots. The camas roots were big in the spring. I remember going out as a kid with groups of people to do that, elders in that community.
Wow.
And then also just like my mom would, learned, she was just gathering knowledge. So we'd go out and harvest other things on our land and dry them and use them. And so my mom also started this huge herbal garden.
Okay.
So she had this giant vegetable garden, and then next to it became this huge herb garden.
Nice.
And so I always had this connection to using plants from the earth for my own healing.
Okay.
My mom, like if we had trouble sleeping, would make us a tea or a stomach upset or things. So it was just like part of my normal way of seeing things. She also was like very whole food based. So, I was just telling someone this story the other day because it's kind of funny, but like how many people would come over and be like, why is your rice brown?
Oh, right.
Like,
Yeah, totally.
like, what is that? Is that bread? My mom would make it from scratch and it was like brown and seedy and delicious,
Yep. But doesn't come in a plastic wrap and
exactly
pre-cut
and
all
I'd
that
be
stuff.
like fascinated by the bread that would roll up into a little ball, and like,
I know.
what is this stuff?
Yes. Like it goes from this big size to this little ball. I'm like,
Exactly.
There's something wrong here.
I know the cheese that came in the plastic, Ours was white. I was like, why is yours orange?
Yeah. That's not natural.
I mean, I wanted to be like everybody else, like every kid does in some way. So I'd be like, why don't we ever have sugar? How come we don't have cereal? How come we don't have a TV? Things like that. But I'm really grateful.
Now you appreciate it. Yeah, most definitely. Oh
totally.
my gosh. Yeah.
And then in my teenage years, I was having a lot of health issues, like a lot of fatigue, a lot of digestive stuff. Mm-hmm. And my mom had similar issues. So she took us both to a naturopath in Sedona, Arizona, actually. That's beautiful. A long story about why we ended up in Sedona. But that's when so he put us on this really strict diet. Mm-hmm. So at 16, I was like basically not eating any sugar, any fruit even for like a year. Because it was basically a candida cleanse and parasite cleanse.
For a year?
For a year.
Wow.
We did it for a year and a half. We started gradually entering things in, a year in. But it's super clean, mostly like alkaline, tons of vegetables, like very few grains, some meat, not much. I felt the best I'd ever felt after like 3 months. I mean, I went through the sugar craving detox. I went through like...
That's strong.
Yeah. But what it taught me at a really young age is like not only how food can heal and how it can support health, but also he was giving us all sorts of herbs and supplements. I wish I knew now what they were because I didn't, at the time pay much attention, right?
Yeah.
But I really saw that link. And from then on, I was much more aware of my health and healing, even when I left my family home and my mom wasn't cooking for me anymore.
Yeah.
I like really learned like what works for me and what doesn't, and how do you balance health. And also this balance between the Western medical model, which I sometimes utilized.
Right.
And the more holistic natural approach.
Right.
So I didn't realize you could be a professional herbalist.
Okay.
That was something I thought you just like dabbled at, like a home herbalist. That's what my mom did, right? Like she learned enough about herbal medicine to be able to help her family and community, which is definitely a way of herbalism. It's like a community herbalist.
Yeah.
You know enough about what's around you. And a lot of people tell stories of their grandparents, especially if they're coming from Eastern Europe or Russia or somewhere where that tradition's still strong.
Right, yeah.
So it's like handed down through the generations, right? So I had that understanding, and I was always looking up stuff for people, in my books, my herb books, and treating myself, of course, when things came up. And then, interestingly, so I studied at Southern Oregon University in Ashland. That's where I went to school.
Beautiful.
And I got my degree in cultural anthropology. And my mentor at the time, she was like my spiritual and life mentor since I was 16. She recommended I do it at an herbal clinic there. She must have had a premonition. I don't know. So I did my study there of basically of why. So this particular herbal clinic was the owner and founder was a nutritionist and herbalist who mostly worked with cancer patients.
Oh, wow.
And they'd fly in from all over the world. He really wrote a really amazing book, Herbal Medicine, Healing, and Cancer.
Okay.
And so I interviewed a lot of his patients about why they were choosing a natural approach, right? They're dealing with this potentially life-threatening situation. And all of them that I spoke to were doing both. They were doing the conventional cancer treatment route while supporting their overall well-being and health and vitality through mushrooms, through herbs, through nutrition, and changing their diet. And
was that a choice for them to have that dichotomy between Eastern and Western? And...
It was 100% their choice.
Cool, very cool. Right on.
They were seeking him out because they had this inherent belief that you would also want to support and strengthen your own body's resilience,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I was finding out. Like, why did you choose this route? So it was really interesting to me to just hear their stories, you know, of like how they felt their quality of life was so much better. But they were spending, you know, $1,000 a month out of pocket for like these treatments and things. And so they were like very dedicated to it. And so anyway, I was like interning in this clinic that had multiple professional herbalists.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, like this is a thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I still was like, is this what I want to do? And kind of went, you know, on to other things. But then at some point I was like, you know, I love health and healing. I love talking to people about this.
Right.
And it's worked so well for me. I was like, which angle do I want to take? So I decided to study herbal medicine. And so I ended up at Bastyr University here locally.
Awesome. Love
which
Bastyr.
is what brought me to the Seattle area.
Very cool.
So I did the Herbal Science program,
Okay.
which is a Bachelors of Science. There was no master's degree at the time in herbal medicine that was accredited. There's a lot of different programs out there, but this one felt like I'd have like a strong foundation. And, you know, I decided to stay here after, which Bastyr has a lot of credibility here. I mean, it does nationally, but it definitely has like credibility here, which as an herbalist, you kind of need something to say, this is what my foundation is, because there really is there's no national recognition of herbal medicine or certification or anything like that. So it's basically your education background that you can say, I know enough that I'm not just making this up or just read it in a book like you can, you know, that I have some background behind it. So I was really appreciative of my time there. I am. And continuing my studies afterwards, what I've learned is it's a lifelong learning. Really.
I would imagine. I mean,
herbal medicine's very deep and complex, and there's so many traditions of it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm barely scratching the surface with it, and a lot of my knowledge came from you originally.
Yeah.
But, you know, just to kind of piggyback onto that, just vastness of the knowledge, right? I've been working with mantras lately, and different types of chants, and from different lineages, from Hindu to Zen to East, West, whatever it is, and I've come across some mantras that theoretically were spoken back when Ayurvedic medicine was more regularly practiced in India, and these the idea was that the people that were harvesting these herbs and processing them would chant these mantras while they were doing this to help activate the chemical compounds in them. And now that everything's just processed through machines for the most part, we'll get to years later, which is awesome. For the most part, you know, things are processed by machines. We don't have that human touch and that human like vibration going through them anymore. And so for me personally, the mantra that I learned was a Chamunde Durga mantra, and it's Om Aim Hreem Kleem Chamundaya Viche. And it's an overall protective mantra, but it was also rumored that back in the day, whatever the day is that we quote unquote talk about all the time, the people that harvested the herbs would chant that mantra, and it would help activate in an Ayurvedic way the power of those herbs and the medicines and make them that much stronger. And so, you know, it's, you know, a lot of it may be the placebo effect, which the placebo effect we know works a lot better than the actual effect of a lot of things a lot of times. So, you know, if it works, hey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, to me, that speaks about the relationship we have with plants, right? And I think, truthfully, we're in relationship with everything.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
Ourselves and everything outside of ourselves, quote unquote.
Yes.
We're in relationship with. So for me, like that's why I was so drawn to herbal medicine is because I have a deep relationship with the earth. I have a lot of reverence for the earth. I really give a lot of gratitude and feel so much what the earth gives me just from being in nature alone. But everything that we consume and everything we take in, you know, is earth energy, and it's nourishing the cells of our body. And we're part of nature. We're not separate from it. I think part of what's happening right now is that so many people have gotten so far from that knowledge and understanding that we're part of nature, and we actually are harming ourselves by harming her and harming the earth and the unconsciousness around it. So what you're speaking to, the mantra, is consciousness. It's literally acknowledging that there's an energetic exchange that's happening, and that the plants also are energy, right? Yeah. So like when we take that consciousness out of it, we lose something. And for me, like that was what drew me to herbal medicine, is like I still, and you know, there's so much we're learning about different compounds and different like lab created things, and they all have their value. But when it always comes back to me is like But when you taste a plant, you smell a plant,
Right.
you pick it from your garden or out in nature, you remember that connection. And to me, that's like such an important part of it.
Right.
And why I actually love working with the raw plants too.
Yeah.
And actually encouraging people to be okay with the taste of some of them when they're like, oh, can I just take it in a capsule or something where I can just bypass that? Which, you know, it has its value. They definitely have compounds, biochemical compounds that do act in the body. But there is a relationship that I think if we call upon that and have consciousness around it can actually benefit us even more.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful statement, because it's almost like the difference between synthetic, like, okay, so we know holy basil, it's a great herb. It helps to remove plaque from your damaged brain cells, improve cognitive response and all this stuff, right? So, but holy basil, can't really patent it, right? Because it's an herb we make outside. So, you know, we take the synthetic compound of holy basil, you know, create that as a chemical and then put that into some kind of pill, right? So in theory, we're doing the same thing because it's the same stuff. But to your point, we've removed part of the human factor to it. And in doing that, we remove the symbiotic relationship that we have with that. You know, it's kind of like in the 80s and 90s when we were developing weight machines. Everything was pulleys and levers and hydraulics and all these cables and all this shit. When now we know that if you just put a handle on the end of a cannonball for a kettlebell, that is the best thing you can do for your body right now, right? We've learned all this stuff, right? And so it's, you know, it's kind of like, trying not to be upset with the past us for doing the things that we've done, because we kind of have to bastardize things to understand how beautiful they are. And now it's just like that. Okay, now we're realizing, okay, who else realizes it? Come on over here. We'll realize how beautiful it is. You know, this is the world we live in. This is the relationships we create, the community that we have, the conversations that we have. You know, all that goes into the health that we keep as human beings and as a universe, because like you said, it's not just us. You know, it's like, if you look at the self, there's like the small self, which is like lowercase s, is me, is just me, you know, egocentrical self. But if you think about the big self with the capital S, that's everything, right? Not just everybody, everything, right? And oh gosh, if we can start to get to that understanding that everything that we do affects something in some kind of way, and live in that kind of consciousness and that conscious awareness.
Absolutely.
It kind of talks about that 1% that you were talking about earlier. Before we had a conversation before we came up here about the 1%, you know, and that's it. You know, it's at that 1% of people. It's like, hey, I know it's just I know it's a little bit of us, but come on over. It's cool, and let's play on this side. Right. You know, everything.
And then it reverberates out into the collective.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
most definitely.
Absolutely. And I think it really is like honoring our multidimensionality. And the plants or other life, you know, on this planet have a multidimensional aspect to them too.
Right.
You spoke about holy basil. In Hinduism, it's a sacred plant. You may have heard of that. They like grow it on their altars.
Holy basil, I did. Yeah,
I think and tend it, and it's supposed to open the crown chakra to like higher wisdom.
Yeah.
So it's like, it has that energetic property if you call upon that and you utilize it with intention that way. And obviously it has all these healing benefits for the physical body as well. So, and depending on how you take it, you know, clip a few leaves and make a tea, or you make an extract from it, or like how concentrated is it?
Right.
How are you relating to it?
Yeah.
Can shift how it affects you.
Most definitely. There's a concept. I think it's an African concept, a proverb. It's called Ubuntu. Ubuntu. Sorry, and it's basically the idea is I am because we are, right? And it's that deep seated awareness that like nothing can exist without anything else, right? For us to exist, we need trees, right? And the trees they recycle carbon dioxide, make oxygen for us, but they're also the home for billions of different animals, bacteria, whatever it is. They stabilize the ground soil so that things can grow. They shade other things so other things can grow, right?
Absolutely.
And then you think about like electromagnetism, right? If we didn't have electromagnetism, none of our cells would be held together by anything at all. Like with gravity, right? All these things that like we just take for granted, air, water, all these things is like they're there. And if we didn't have those, we wouldn't be here. Nothing would be here. So if we find ways to, I love the idea of what somebody told me one time, instead of like, okay, what do I need to do to this ground so that it can give me the most, let's say, vegetables that I'm going to plant? Okay. That's one way to think about it. Or it can be like, hey, how can I make this ground the happiest it can so that it can thrive in the best way possible? And then by thriving, it'll also grow these beautiful plants that will help me nourish and help me sustain energies. And then I can take care of my family. And my family can continue to grow and learn and become better human beings and part of this world and all this stuff. And it's like, when you can see those dotted lines, the answers almost become a little bit easier, even though they're harder because they're not cultural norms. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And that comes like this regenerative agriculture concept that more and more people are working with. Is that example you just gave. It's like, how do we optimize the health of the soil and the earth that this abundance comes from, not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of all the other life forms that rely on it. Yeah. Including the fungi and the bacteria and the microbiome of the planet itself, right? Like that supports our own microbiome. Yeah. Yeah.
God, I love that.
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
It's fun over here.
All we need.
1% pool, man.
It's awesome.
Oh, yeah. So why don't, actually, would you mind sharing the 1% concept we talked about downstairs? Cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to probably not use the right terminology or anything.
We're paraphrasing.
But I took away the, message from it. But basically that in quantum physics, we are all part of this field, right? This field of energy. I mean, they pretty much have shown that we're all connected and that something moves over here and it can move, miles and miles away
like
over
quantum
there.
Entanglement, something like that. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And so the idea is what they found in quantum physics is if 1% change their shape or organizational structure within a certain field, the rest will follow suit. Right. So they basically change their structure in response. So from a consciousness perspective, that correlates if you think of the quantum physics and we're part of that field, right? That if 1% of us on this planet right now, the human population, shifts their consciousness, that it'll hold that space and actually the energy will ripple through the field to elevate everyone else.
I love that so much.
And it gave me so much hope, I would say. That's what I was sharing with you earlier, because it's like, I know we're going through a big transformation where, however you want to look at it, we're at a tipping point. We're at a point where, the ecosystem will collapse if we continue the way we're going. I mean, there's all these predictions, but from a spiritual perspective, I do believe we're elevating in consciousness out of this way of like us versus them, the third dimensional reality, right? Polarization. Definitely. That we always have to struggle to survive and that we take from the earth as much as we can, and that like people, there's some that benefit and some that don't, like just that idea, right? I believe we're shifting out of that. And I know that in my being, right? But I look around and I'm like, oh my God, there's 8 billion people on this planet. And like, how many have to be awake on some level or conscious to actually make a meaningful change? It's hard to see it right now for me. Hard to see how we're going to do that. But that message really like helped me, because it was like, okay, maybe that 100th monkey, a lot of people use that too when I bring up the 1%. It's this idea that if enough people and that critical mass, and that's 1% according to quantum physics, shift.
Which is not a lot of people. 1%.
I know, comparatively to like, I'd heard things like 51%, which is basically democracy, right? It's like, no.
We got to get the sway of the masses.
I don't know if we're going to get to 51%. I don't know how long that's going to take. Does the earth really, could she have enough capacity to hold space for us for that long? Right? So I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. 1%. We can do 1%. Definitely. I can do 1%. Yes. I can like, my like sphere of influence and ripple effect and yours and all of us who are, on this journey. And I think sharing that energy, I believe we can do 1%.
Definitely.
And I'm sure it will be more than 1% that actually shift, or at least, but it feels like to have something to aim for that feels doable.
Yeah. And that's that start, that 1%. Let's come on over here and play in this field, and let's get more people over here, And I love it because we talk about quantum physics a lot on this micro level because it's microscopic, it's things we can't really see, but when we tend to like bring this into a macro level, into a bigger level, we tend to forget. That just happens on a small level. When you pay attention to the results of things get swayed. That just happens on a small level. That doesn't happen on a macro level. It's like, no, that's happening all around us all the time. So let's broaden our vision scope see that the little things are happening probably on a very big scale, right?
Absolutely.
And with that awareness and that knowing with the G, that's what you were talking about earlier, that intrinsic knowing. There's a new term I just learned recently. It's knowing with a G, G-N-O-W-I-N-G.
Oh.
And that's that intrinsic. You can't explain it. You have no idea why you know it, but you know it, and you know it, right?
Right.
And I love that because there is those intrinsic knowings, especially the more I've personally walked my spiritual path. I've had these moments, these visions, these meditations, these, experiences that have led me to just feel really good about the knowledge that I have about the not knowing where it came from or why I know it, but I know it and I feel it, and there's even things I was talking to Monica yesterday. There's things that are floating around now in my head that I can't put words to. Like there's concepts and things. Like I was in a yin class yesterday and I was like deep into my first pose, and I was consciously having this conversation with something inside my head, and it was words I could understand but concepts I didn't know. And it was very strange for me, and I was like, okay, wait, this has happened before. Try as hard as you can to pay attention to what's going on, right? Try your hardest, right? And even though I'm part of the conversation in my head, I'm like, okay, pay attention, take notes. And so I'm in there and I'm like, okay, paying attention. And then I hear a knock on the window. I was right by a window in the studio and a guest had come in late. And so she totally pulled me out of my little this place where I was, where I'm like, remember. But I think just the fact that like
record. Did you record that?
I need to. I know. I need
No,
to
I'm
like those
in your
internal
head.
recordings.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly. Like Google's working on that
pause
shit.
and come back to that later.
But I think, it is, and I was annoyed for a moment because I was pulled out of a place I wanted to be. But at the same time, I was like, okay, no, you were pulled out for a reason. Probably so you could continue to think about why you can't understand what they were talking about, right? There is knowledge in there that you're not understanding. Figure out why, And so it's that, kind of get out of the way of your own mentality and just trust that your knowing with the G knows what's going on,
Yeah.
And I think one more point with your with the 1%. There's a guy named Vinay Gupta that I listened to a couple years ago. I heard him on a podcast, and he had this interesting theory about. It's kind of similar to the 1%. He didn't call it the 1%, but it's very similar to. And he was talking about how, as a humanity, we're slowly starting to shift into a more conscious understanding of the world and the universe. And it's not a shift that can happen just overnight, right? We can't just take all 8 billion people and shift them over to this consciousness because humanity has been built in this specific way for a long time. And so we can't just blow it up and rebuild it, right? We can, but it's that might take a little bit longer. It might be more worse
traumatic.
Exactly, right? And so we have this small bits of awakening and these people that just have this and not like awakening like you become a Buddha or Jesus or whatever you want to call it, right? But you have this awakening in life that gives you more understanding of how you feel that life should be lived in a more open kind of way. And while that happens, like, okay, these small groups of people start coming over from, let's say, over, and not talking political sides, but let's just say from the left to the right, right? So we have these people that are just hanging out in this group, like unconscious awareness on the left side, and on the right side is where there's the consciousness. And slowly and surely, all these people are starting to come over slowly. And as they start to come over into this conscious side, the systems and the standards start to change. Like we start redefining what success is, and we start redefining what human rights are. And we start, in understanding what world and human and universal and all these rights are, not just human rights. And through that slow shift, the systems and the processes and the governments and all the politicals change as well as they slowly shift to this new conscious level. And so, that gave me kind of hope too. And so for you to say, you put that 1% title on it, I love that it has, a name for it, because for him, it was just the way he explained it was just kind of like arbitrary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I love that they've shown that in quantum physics and that, that can like infiltrate into our understanding of energy, but also just how change happens, right? And how that works.
Yeah.
I mean, what you were describing, I was thinking how the structures in play right now that have been the way they've been for a long time, it's like they don't like to change, right?
Yeah.
We don't like to like our brains don't necessarily like to change. Even in my own experience, there's times when I have a new understanding, or I have an epiphany, or I have this like breakthrough moment, but my brain's like, but this is the way we've always done things, right?
We're already
but
set up
this
for
is where
this.
I'm comfortable, And I mean, our brains like to compartmentalize.
Totally.
That's definitely like, oh, this is, and then, but and you can almost like train your brain to think differently about things by, like catching yourself in the moment or bringing consciousness, like you were talking about, even when your conversation you're having with your brain of just bringing in awareness to be like, oh, I don't understand yet, but I'm going to pay attention and I'll learn or something will come forward that tells me what this whole thing was about. And something's about to like shift, right? Like some new information is coming in or whatever that felt like to you, but that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
So like even being able to catch yourself in those moments or everything is part of how we like retrain our brain to be like, oh, okay, we can like open up to a new possible way of doing things.
Right.
And on this planet, that's happening on like a big collective level, right? It's like you just keep doing the same things and keep doing the same things until it's like clearly not working anymore.
Yeah.
Or things break down enough to be like, oh, there is this other way. There is another possibility. Right. And I just feel like that's so important because, like not only do I see more and more people coming in with like stress and anxiety and mental health issues, but we know like on a statistical level, like mental health issues are on the rise. During this COVID time, a lot of people are choosing to leave the planet intentionally, a lot of suicides and things like that. And it's like, obviously there's in the health, just physical health is abysmal, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially in the US, but worldwide, I mean, just the rates of like chronic disease and cancer, like 1 in 3 now or 1 in 2. I mean, it's like off the charts, right? And so you're like, clearly we're sick as a culture, right? Like we're not thriving. If this was happening in the body, you'd be like, what do I need to do? Like this is not sustainable, not for vitality, not for well-being. If that's your goal, right, is to like live as optimally as you can, which has always been my goal. Like part of what I loved, what attracted me to herbal medicine was this concept of not just like always managing symptoms or healing from something. It was actually like, how do you actually live more vitally and like, how do we have our bodies be as optimally healthy as possible so that we can really get the most out of life. Right?
So instead of like starting from a base level of like say -5 and then trying to get your supplements to get you up to 0, you start at 0 and then you grow from there.
And how do we actually get even better?
Right. Exactly.
Is this as healthy as I can be, or can I even be healthier?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like ideally that's how we'd be with our ecosystem too. Like, I don't think we're supposed to not like, cut down trees or, utilize the Earth's resources that they are. It's just, how do we relate to them?
Right.
Instead of this idea of like, oh, we can just take and take and take, or cut down and dump stuff into the ocean.
Right.
With this idea, it's endless, right? When it clearly isn't. We're hitting the end of that. That even that concept doesn't. But it's like, how do we actually like work in relationship with the Earth? How do we steward the Earth? How do we use these resources with consciousness and actually like, can we thrive on this planet? Like, can the planet and us thrive?
Can we work
and
together?
Other life forms.
Definitely.
So I don't see them as separate.
Yeah.
It's like really a lot of the same. When you learn to really care for yourself and optimize your own health, I feel like it's just natural to then it's integrated with everything else, right?
I agree 100%. And I think that, once we're slowly getting to understanding that we're not machines. We can't just, like you said, we can't just treat our symptoms. We have things that are going wrong for a reason, and we find that original reason, and then we can cure the reason and not just the symptoms.
Right.
So when we can stop looking at our bodies as machines, then we'll stop looking at the world as just this thing that's giving us things that we'll just replenish later, right? Because that's part of the machine, right? There's this like that's the warehouse for the machine is the world that's fixing us whenever we go broken.
Right.
That's just so disenchanted and franchised from where we need to be. But that 1%. And again, like that's that slow trickle, that trickle of, okay, I understand that I am basically, for lack of better terms, we're shitty gods, right? Human beings are just shitty gods. Like we have all these abilities to create, to destroy, to manifest, to do all these things. Like we are aware of our own evolution. What other being on this planet is aware of their own evolution and also now to the ability they can interact with the evolutionary process, right? For the lack of a better term, again, we're just shitty fucking gods, right? We have the power to create, destroy. We just wield it like swords, and we don't actually understand how it works.
Exactly.
Right. And so, like having that understanding of like my body, my temple, it's a being with me that's symbiotic with the rest of this planet and with the rest of this universe. Then everything else kind of falls into place. Right. But it's getting that big shift in that mentality first of like, hey,
yeah,
let's look at something other than, let's look at the big self, not the little self.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting you use the word machine, because I was thinking originally, like, even if people actually treated their body like a machine, it'd be better than what it is now. Because I will say to people, like, would you, skip multiple oil changes for your car? Would you give it bad fuel?
Right.
Dirty fuel that's going to cause it to break down. I mean, the way most people feed themselves, just looking at that, is not about health.
Yeah.
At all.
That is very.
It's not understanding what your body needs to even function.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's almost just it's not even serving a purpose. It's just like checking a box.
It's addiction. It's sugar. It's like processed stuff. It's like chemical agriculture. It's animal horrible treatment of animals that you're consuming. It's just like, but even just from a protein, carbohydrate, flavonoid rich, like even if you think of like what these plants give us on a very basic, like physical level, we're even failing abysmally.
Right. Yeah.
Like think of like, how can I feed this machine? If you want to look at it, that would be better than what we're doing right now.
That's a really good point.
Crazy.
That is a really good point.
But then there's so much more to it than that, right?
Yeah.
But like, you wouldn't put like dirty water. It's just like, it just blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah. And working in, in businesses that have a lot of machines, there's preventative maintenance schedules. Exactly. There's all this stuff that like you regularly do that.
You know what to do and not to do to keep it running optimally for as long as possible, or at least running for as long as possible. Right. Yeah. The thing is, our bodies are forgiving in the sense that obviously a lot of people can get away with treating them really poorly.
Right. Yeah.
For a long time.
Yep.
And then the problems start, right?
Yep.
So it's like, oh, I'm fine. I'm not fine, you know?
Yep.
But then it's like, oh, I have cancer. But like, why do you have cancer?
Right.
Like, where did that come from? It doesn't come out of nowhere.
Exactly.
And that's what I find really frustrating there's levels to this, but with the rates of cancer rising and all the machines of generating funding for cancer research and all these things, they're not looking at why.
No, not at
all. For the most part, I never hear that. It's like, what are the cures? What are the treatments, right? I'm like, okay, is no one like really looking at like why they've increased so much in the last 20 years?
What is
there are researchers who are.
Good.
But it's like not very many ask that question.
Yeah.
It's just management. Right. And at that point, like our technology's bad enough that it's then putting more toxic exposure when there's like graphs that show the rise of chemical agriculture and GMO foods introduced and the exact same curve
with cancer, huh? The diabetes. Yep, totally. Yeah.
And autoimmune diseases. Like this. It's like insane.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's correlation. There is no like exact causation, but my gut tells me.
Right. And I'm, as a scientific community that at least the United States is, but most of the world is, when we see factors like that, like it's up to the scientific community because that's what we put our faith into. Not all of us need scientific backing to understand what we understand, but those that do.
But there's science to back this up.
There is, totally, most definitely. But like, since we all know and we see the correlation, then that should be studied as the causation of one or the other.
Let's look deeper into this.
Totally.
Is it possible that like these things we're consuming that were never in our food systems before are causing some of these?
Yeah.
Or the number of chemicals? I get quite passionate about it because I find it really frustrating that like from I want to talk more about like empowering health because I think that's like a big part, like being empowered in our own health and making our health choices is like a big passion of mine. That yes, we can have healers and we can have people that support us, but really the conventional medicine model has taught us to hand our power over to someone else.
Right.
You literally go to a doctor and a lot of times, I hear the stories all the time, right? Because of the industry I'm in. But a lot of times they get invalidated for anything they feel. Right. The doctor says, I know. Here's your medications.
Yeah. Don't listen to your intuition.
No.
Listen to me that I've only met you one time and here's all your answers.
And I maybe spent 5 minutes with you tops.
Yeah.
Oh, no, food doesn't matter. Oh, no, that doesn't matter. Oh, it doesn't matter that you're on 5 other medications. That's not that's causing that.
Yeah.
Just invalidate it all the time, right?
Right.
And it's very much handing your power over to someone else and giving your power away. So what I find frustrating is a human on this planet. So talking about vitality and optimal health, that was always my goal. And what I've realized in my own healing journey is how much I am now mitigating the exposures to chemicals in my environment to stay healthy.
Oh, okay.
So I can't just focus on vitality. I have to focus on detoxing. I have to focus on filtering my air, filtering my water,
right.
making sure I'm making clean food choices. I know how it impacts me, right? And I find it so frustrating that all these chemicals have been released on us literally without my choice.
Right. Yeah.
Without my consent.
Not even.
Our whole approach to it is like, until they prove that they're bad enough, then maybe we'll pull them. There's no safety testing.
Right. Like fluoride in all the water and all this shit that's going on. And
no safety testing.
Totally.
And if there is, it's suppressed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're literally poisoning ourselves.
Right.
Like, we're being poisoned. That's what it feels like, because a lot of people don't know and they don't have a choice. They open up their tap and they drink what they have in front of them, but it's fluoridated, it's chlorinated. It's actually for the optimization of their pipes.
Right.
Not for our
Not
physical
for ours
well-being.
optimization. Right.
And then you have the food structure that's been put into place that is the power. It's powerful.
Yeah.
The lobby behind all those is super powerful. So even if this information starts coming out or these questions start getting asked, it gets suppressed.
Yep.
And so I'm just like, people are fighting this like uphill battle. It feels like a lot of times, just to get healthy. And they're also having to like deal with this assault.
Right.
And I definitely know how to work with that differently. I've definitely worked with the consciousness around it. I don't want to come at it as like I'm always being like attacked by these.
Right,
but I also feel like it's okay to be like, yeah, that's not okay.
Definitely.
I didn't give permission for this.
Yeah.
And like, we give away our power to all these companies that release all these chemicals into the air, and we breathe the same air.
Right.
Like, how did they get the authority to like pollute our air that we all have to breathe, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So now we have to like deal with the consequences.
Right.
So it's just like, we've been taught and trained and basically trained and educated to not question.
Right. It's become our culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, it's just how it is.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
I just have to
we
deal
just
with
accept it.
Oh,
That's
I
just
just
the way
have
it
to-
is.
yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm like, no, like, what has to change is like, to be really like in relationship with everything that's happening, we also have to be like able to feel empowered in ourselves, which is education, which is understanding what's happening, which is like taking back our power as people.
Right.
And saying, yeah, no, that's not okay. You don't get to do that. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how much you lobby. I don't care how much,
Right. Just because there's an industry now created around cancer curing, not even curing, but treatment, doesn't mean that we can't find a way to prevent cancer and not just cure it. Right. And
if that was the motivation, we would have done something about what's happening right now. We would have already started mitigating some of this chemical exposure and stuff, because guaranteed that's like one of the biggest links. It's disrupting our genetic makeup.
It is, and there's, in a capitalistic world that we live in, we've created industry around all these things that are so horrible for us, from the shitty processed foods to military to wars, all this stuff. Like, we've created industries around it. And for those industries to survive, there has to be famine, there has to be disease, there has to be war, there has to be all these things that we're trying to theoretically fight against. I'm air quoting right now. You can't see me.
I see the air quotes.
Right? But at the same time, we're putting billions and trillions of dollars towards, right? Like, I read a study one time that there's let's take Fijian apples, right? Fiji apples. Everybody loves Fiji apples, right? There's a percentage. I want to say it's the book that I read said 35% of all apples that are said to be from Fiji are grown in Washington, flown to Fiji, and then stay on the plane, and then they fly back.
No way.
Literally. That happens with food all the time.
That's
it's not actually
ridiculous.
Right. And how much food, how much waste you're wasting, and chemicals and the gas and all this, the shit you have to go back and forth, the pollutants that you're putting in the air and the atmosphere, just so you can label something that's from Fiji and that charge $1 more an apple or something.
I know.
Right. God damn it. Like, we're literally gutting ourselves. We're like seppukuing ourselves. We have our own knives and we're gutting ourselves.
Oh my God. Sometimes I just can't.
Industry that we
the
have.
only thing I can do is just laugh. Like, I'm just like,
Yeah. But
I laugh and then I cry. And then I move through it and I'm like, okay, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. Get the ugly cry out of the way, and then, all right, I got motivation. Let's do some shit.
I got to ride those waves a lot. Yeah.
But, I think you have to, though. You have to feel those feels. You have to feel the emotion and the horror. And like Monica, she's a vegan. And as I get it as much as I can, but I don't get it because I would say at least 50%, if not probably 60% of the time, we go out to eat. Her food gets what she calls roofied with some kind of animal product because, and because they don't realize it. Oh, it's just chicken stock. Well, chicken stock's meat, and meat can't be in this person's body, right? Oh, it's just cheese. Yeah, but that's a choice she's made not to eat that cheese, right? So like, it's so frustrating that you have to get upset and you have to, because you have to make a stand. And like a lot of times people don't listen until you yell, and that's unfortunate, but we have to be that person that kicks and screams and yells and to fight for the reality that we choose to live in, because it is our reality that we choose to live in.
Exactly. Yeah. And to be, spiritual and to like have consciousness doesn't mean to be passive.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's an element that I do think maybe we're transcending out of like this idea of having to like be this like march on the street activist, and yet there's times when that clearly is the only thing that makes anything happen. Right. Like you actually have to say like no, and look at how many people stand with me on this no, right? Like we're collectively saying this isn't okay.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of like empowered place of like, actually this isn't gonna work if we want the world that we say we want. Yeah. And I truly do believe most people want to live in a world that's more peaceful and supports their health and well-being if they really broke it down. Right. And really understood what was happening to suppress that or to keep them at a lower level of vitality or...
Well, I think, actually, now that we're talking about it, maybe that's why the 1% is so strong, right? Because it's something you have to realize about yourself. It's not something you can be told, right? It's something you have to really intrinsically know, right? And so when you do know, that knowing with the G is so strong.
Yeah, you can't unknow it.
Yeah, you know right. Yeah, it's like when you find a little bit of awakening in life. You scratch the foil away of life, and you see that little bit of light coming through. You can't just put stuff back on that. That light's coming through. So that journey that the 1% has to take to tear away the cultural norms and to be something different and to be a loud person when they're quiet or to be a quiet person when they want to be loud, right? But to know that consciousness of their decisions and their actions, maybe that's why that 1% is so strong and has so much pull, because 1% of awakened understanding of consciousness is stronger than the 7.9 billion people that are left.
Exactly.
Fuck, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
That's true. I love that too. Yeah. The amount of energy you're able to hold in your being.
Yeah. And that's, that's why those sanghas and those satsangs or, those communities that we create are so important now. I've been an introvert I've claimed to be an introvert my entire life. And I think I hid behind the fact that I have very extroverted jobs. I worked in the restaurant industry for a long time, and it's out there. I'm always talking to people and kissing babies, shaking hands, coloring pictures, all this shit. And it's exhausting, and I get home and I'm like, I don't want to do anything extrinsic again. Right? I just want to sit here and just drink my wine and watch TV, right?
Totally.
And but now it's that shift, and it's that shift of I'm not expending all my energy in a work environment now. Now I have all this energy left to do the things that I'm passionate about. Oh my God, I'm not introverted. I just don't want to be involved with trying to get a guest check average $1 higher and putting somebody else on the road more intoxicated in a quote unquote safe way so that I can get a bonus and that guy can get a DUI. Right?
Totally.
Take that level of stress off of your mentality, off of your consciousness, and see what else that makes room for. Jesus Christ, man.
That's awesome.
That for me, and that's my personal path, know. And through that awareness, that has given me the ability to look at things more consciously and to put more time into the decisions that I make instead of just like, yeah, okay, cool. Cultural norm, do that. Okay, cool. Let's do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of people, I think if they had that awareness to like notice and perceive they kind of take on a daily basis that's actually affecting their health and well-being or affecting their capacity. I get it. Like in our stressed out kind of like run, do everything to like try to like pay your bills and everything. Yeah. It's easy to just be like, well, I just don't have time for that. Or I don't have I'm just going to go with what is easy and available and convenient,
Totally. Yeah. I mean,
I totally have a lot of compassion for people that way.
Yeah.
And I also think people are in my experience, a lot of us who are on a spiritual path tend to be very empathic, right? We feel a lot of what's happening around us. I actually think most people are. And a lot of people just get overwhelmed by it. Yeah. So they kind of have to just like protect themselves in a way because it's just too much to feel their own feelings, let alone everybody else around them, and try to like manage.
Right. I have a client that I'm working with that has, I mean, she's probably mid-30s or something, not been a spiritual or religious person her entire life, nothing really going on that aspect. And then all of a sudden, what she says, it's her quote, is she got bitch slapped with empathy. One day she woke up and she felt every feel and everybody's feel and all the people that she never met. She feels all the, like walking through the mall, feeling the feels, walking down the street, feeling everybody's
she
feels.
Just got like blown open.
Totally.
Somehow.
You know, and it's like, you know, and she is terrified. And so she came to me and we worked through some stuff with Reiki. And, but basically it's, you know, what I'm trying to get her to understand is this gift was thrust upon you for a reason, right? Whoever was waiting, was tired of waiting, says, okay, here you go. Here's your gift. Go find somebody to help you deal with it because you need this. Right. This is in your life for a reason. Exactly. Find out how it fits there, you know? And so, and that's where we find the help, the community, the sanghas, right? Yeah. We find those people around us because we don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers.
No,
but,
we're not supposed to be an island unto ourselves.
Exactly. You know, that combination of knowledge, that shared knowledge. And that's where we start to find those cool things, those beautiful communities, those great ideas. And we start to shift. We find those shifts.
And we learn how to feel, but still have healthy boundaries.
Yes, that's a big one. And you kind of mentioned it earlier, like when a lot of people that are spiritual, you know, they might have this connotation of being like soft spoken or, you know, peaceful and all this stuff, which is you know, a lot. But at the same time, like I know a lot of very strong spiritual people that have a lot to say. They're very loud about what they have to say, and they're very direct about how they say it. You know, so it's not always this, you know, like with Ram Dass used to talk about when he first found spirituality, he wanted to be just like that omnipotent, you know, divinity of a person, right? So he wasn't angry, he wasn't pissed, but he was holding it all inside. And if you hold it inside, right? God, yeah, exactly. You're here with humanity. Learn the curriculum, right? Be upset, be angry, but not just flippantly. Understand how to manage your anger, manage your stress. You know, because it's there for a reason. I think there was I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh I was listening to. If not him, it was another like a Rinpoche of some like not quite a lama, but right underneath. And he was saying that he experienced anxiety, and through his anxiety, he would see it in his meditation, and he would try to push it away. Like, anxiety, get away from me. I don't want to deal with you. And one day in his meditation, he invited anxiety to sit next to him. You know, said, hey, come sit with me. Come sit with me. You're here for a reason. Clearly, let's talk. You know, and through that welcoming in of anxiety, and because it's there for a reason, right? It doesn't need to control your life, but it shows up for a reason, right?
To communicate with
exactly, you. Exactly. You know, and so making friends with it and understanding how it fits with your practice, and then embracing it, and then not being afraid of it, right? And because the more we understand something, the less fear we have with it. You know, so I love that approach because
I love that too.
Depression, anxiety, you know, fear, all this stuff, you know,
give it a place, give it space to tell you what it's about.
Definitely.
Right? Like,
yes. Welcome
and
in.
that's
How
part
are you?
of us, right? So if we can hold space that way and give it the space to share, really, I mean, that's all what we want is to be heard and to be seen and to be understood, right? So
most definitely.
Yeah.
God, I love
Nobody
that.
likes to be shut out.
No, hell no, man. Even, you know, there's sometimes it's funny, and Lauren Acton, big shout out. She was one of the women that taught me a lot about singing bowls and Reiki and things like that in an unofficial capacity, just in more of a friend kind of way. But she would tell me that when she would accidentally hit a bowl or like ding a bowl and then want to quiet it, you're basically asking it to shut up after you've hit it, right? So you want to be nice about it. So she says, you know, you kind of rub the outside of the bowl and say you're sorry, you know, and just like asking it to, you know, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to hit you. You know, you can quiet down now. But it's that living in consciousness, right?
Totally.
You know, it's those little things that, you know, when you can live with that kind of consciousness, that everything has a soul, everything has a purpose. Even this you know, microphone in front of me, there's nothing natural about this. You know, there's, you know, plastics and metals and all this shit, right? But if you treat it as such that there's a soul to it, then that's gonna just marinate throughout the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Right? And everything that you talk to, you and interact with, you know, all these things, if you create that intrinsicness with it, then everything can be something, and everything has a reason.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's energy.
It is.
It's part of consciousness.
It is. Yeah. That's one of the things I'm struggling with right now for, I still consume meat, and I I think it was Monica that brought this concept to my attention. It's not her concept, but she brought it to my attention. And you mentioned it earlier, but that energy that the animals hold on to through their passing, and a lot of the ways that we don't humanely take care of animals, right? Whether it's the way that they're being held before they're murdered, or the slaughtering process. And that trauma that goes through them is in the meat that we eat. And so there's no wonder we're more traumatic and we're more anxiety ridden, we're more depressed, because if you see the squalor that these animals are living in, and then the way that they're murdered, then God, no wonder,
And they're feeling the fear of the other animals getting killed in front of them or by them or whatever. And so it changes like that stress hormones going through their body,
right? Yeah.
I will say that I've sat with that a lot too. And I feel like where you can give yourself some compassion, if you haven't found this already in yourself, of choosing to still consume some animal products, is I don't know that we've fully evolved physically, to fully be plant-based.
Right.
Some people do it way better than others.
Right. Yeah.
But I know people that just they were vegan. They tried so hard. They did everything right, protein, and they just weren't thriving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their body needed some animal protein.
Animal protein
right?
of some sort. Yeah.
And they just changed when they went back to eating some, So I don't have this judgment that we should all be plant-based, and even how we treat plants can be really horrible too, in monocropping and egg, so I think it's the consciousness around it.
Right. Right.
This idea that if we were in relationship with the animals and that we did this with a consciousness, and they were like, sure. I'm willing to give my life to you if you do it in this respectful way.
Definitely.
That there can be relationship. And I know there might be people listening who are like, that's not true. You never should kill an animal. And I get that perspective too.
Right. Yeah.
And I actually hope that we are evolving to be fully plant-based, or a different relationship of what we consume and how we consume. And, I don't know. We'll see. We might not be here when that full evolution happens.
Right.
Does that mean the predators go away in the natural world, and don't kill each other anymore? That they all are just eating plants? I don't know, because that energy is still here. And if you look at nature, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Sometimes how, and it's life has to give up life for another life. That's just part of the cycle. So I do believe for me, it's more the consciousness behind it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I've adopted personally is, and I'm not perfect about it. I still have to remember to do this, but I try to thank the meal that's in front of me. Thank you for giving your life that I can sustain mine. I don't, and a lot of, so just want to make this really clear too. A spiritual path, you don't have to tie yourself to a religious figure, right? Spirituality can be very much yours. And I say that because I wrestle a lot with spirituality and religion. I don't like the word God because I have a bad experience with that word. But it's not that I don't believe in a goddish type, overarching, source. Yeah, exactly. Right. But, and so when you're thinking, you don't have to thank a god. You don't have to thank a deity. You can thank the meal in front of you. Hey, thank you, this being, for giving your life that I can sustain mine, And so for me, and the reason I say that is because, sometimes that God name holds people away from exploring those different types of divinity that they can find. And so if that's you, replace the word God with self, replace the word God with something that makes sense, or just leave it all out, you know, but don't let that be the thing that keeps you from finding your spiritual nature, because spirituality and religion are very different.
Very different.
Yeah. I like I think I talked about this on a podcast before, but religion is for people who are scared of God or scared of hell. Spirituality is for people that have been through hell, right? And not saying one is better than the other, but, we all have our paths,
Yeah, I feel grateful that I really wasn't raised in a religion. So for me, that's always been the case. And I've, throughout my life, sometimes used the word God, but meaning what I mean for that, not this male figure in the sky or whatever.
This Caucasian, long-haired one.
No,
shit, I look like God. If you want to put that out there, and I am by no means, right? God is not this Caucasian, long-haired white dude chilling out in fucking robe and slippers,
You get to have this, you don't, Yeah, no, I don't believe that at all. Yeah. But Yeah, but just this idea that we are a part of something bigger.
Definitely.
But I believe it's a co-creation.
Yeah, definitely.
Rather than like a just top-down decision about how things are meant to go, right? Like, or you're supposed to, or you had to go through that really hard thing, or, you know. I mean, it's hard to reconcile sometimes why some people and animals and, you know, beings struggle so much or go through horrible traumatic experiences and others don't, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard to reconcile that sometimes.
Yeah. I find some solace in the idea of reincarnation for stuff like that. With the idea that, you know, we all have to experience all facets of life, good, bad, and different, from all sexualities, from traditional to non-traditional to different type of species, you know. And I think, you know, getting that well-rounded understanding of what life is and can be, and how horrible it can be and how beautiful it can be, you know, gets us prepared for whatever we're getting ready for, you know, whatever you believe in that next step is, you know, whether we're just going to go sit in the ground for the rest of life, or we just, you know, learn our lessons here and continue on in some beautiful kind of way in another realm that just is even more learning experience oriented than this realm, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That helps me too.
Yeah. I can't prove it one way or the other, but that's that knowing with the G, right? You just that knowing, right? Yeah. And, you know,
and if it benefits you and it, you know, doesn't harm others, then I think it's worth it. You believe it because it helps you on your path,
right?
Whether it's real or right or wrong, or you've got the capital T truth or not,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a beautiful segue, because one of the things that you've introduced me to was the EOS line that you have. EOS line. And you know, I took that on faith, you know, like we've had a relationship before, you know, we've known each other for a couple of years by that time. And, you know, I've put a lot of trust in you, and you haven't steered me wrong. And so you're like, hey, here's this thing. This is this thing I created. I'm doing it with a dude in Whidbey Island, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, actually, my business partner, Krissa, she's out in Novelty Hill.
Novelty Hill. Okay, cool, perfect.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is the shit. This is my thing, and I love it. And I'm like, cool, let's sign me up. And I, you know, basically went into it with just faith, and just knowing that, okay, cool, this person that hasn't steered me wrong, that's given me a lot of beautiful advice, is going to give me this thing, and I'm going to see how it lands in my life. And it's been fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've used a couple, like I think 3 or 4 different versions of the EOS brand.
Powders.
Yep, the super powders. But I've landed on the Elevate and the Regenerate as my 2 that I just got to go to.
Awesome.
But do you mind talking about how that kind of developed? And I just love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So EOS Healing is the line, and Eos is the goddess of the dawn in Greek mythology. That's right. Okay. So I didn't know that either. My business partner is very in tune, and we do a lot of our creating for this particular line is kind of like next level, bringing in those energetic qualities more forward in our blend. So in meditative space, we do a lot of our formulating.
Cool.
And so she received that name, and then we looked it up, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's the goddess of the dawn. I've never heard of this goddess.
Hell yeah.
And how that energy shows up for me is like that green gold light, like when sunlight goes through trees, you know, when you look up and see it filtering through, it's just that like vibrant green. So it's really about that we are light, and that plants are, you know, light. They use light energy and convert it to, you know, chlorophyll and like create their life forms. And then when we consume that, we're really consuming light, like on the ultimate level, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's like the concept is around this idea of like, how does light support light and be converted in the, like by the plant kingdom, but also by the crystal kingdom, if you want to refer to it that way, that crystals are really like solidified light that the earth has created over time.
Right.
And so it's really a melding of the two. So there's this element of using the plants for our healing, and physically as well as other dimensions of healing. And then weaving in these crystalline elements that support that particular blend, so that when people consume it, the idea is that the more intention you have, of course, the more powerful it has the potential to be.
Right.
But even just that by consuming something that's been so intentionally created and crafted, that your body will react or respond to the energy of it on some level, whether you're conscious of it or not necessarily, right? So it's been really a fun, different way of engaging with the plants. And then we have this whole intention around the sustainability and create, the growing aspect of these plants too, and like really honoring the plant energies themselves. So like our intention, and this is like a work in progress, is to really source from farmers and growers who are already like putting that level of intention into how they're creating, and that it's about healing on deeper levels, their own healing journey, and then how they care and tend for the earth and the plants.
Yeah.
And then if we utilize those plants in our blends and also have the intention around how they're created. The other thing is, speaking of sound and vibrational energy, right? That there's vibration in everything. We have a vibration, our cells do, different cells do, they're just, you can measure a lot of this.
Yeah.
And it's being done. Different devices measure different levels,
There's a lot
like
of cool studies
megahertz
going on
and
out
stuff
there.
like that. And so that certain plants have different vibrational levels.
Okay.
And actually Elevate, the one that you were talking about, has a lot of that. It's a cacao based, which we actually traveled to Ecuador and Peru, and we actually visited some cacao farms.
Oh, wow.
And really had this experience of like the cacao plant herself, which is really interesting because, it's like widely used throughout the earth, throughout the planet, chocolate and cacao, right?
Yeah.
But there's been this like distorted use of this plant, right? And we really felt that energy. If you've ever watched any of the documentaries on cacao production and
unsustainable.
Totally. And there's a lot of, horrible treatment of certain people that are tending the plants, or they're not getting paid, or they're, these big companies are coming in and just kind of taking as much as they can.
Right, yeah.
So just like the distortion that we can do as humans to almost anything if we don't have consciousness around it.
Totally. Yeah.
So there was this very palpable experience of wanting to help heal that energy, because the cacao plant, the cocoa tree, that energy is really beautiful. Right. People do plant ceremonies around cacao, like
use
cacao
it all the time for
healing
plant ceremonies.
ceremonies.
Yeah, most definitely.
And it's got this like vibrational energy and of elevation in the body, and it's ultimately like about love and heart activation and things like that, right? So like it's got this incredible energy that can support healing for individuals and on this planet if it was, if it was experienced differently, if there was more consciousness around it growing. Right. So we got to kind of experience that. And in Elevate, it was so interesting because it's cacao and rose. And rose, definitely the essential oil, has the highest megahertz reading of any plant they've measured.
Wow.
It's a really high vibration.
Very cool.
And we use rose in all of our products for that reason. It's about the heart. It's like it's this higher level love, like vibration, right? So it's cacao and rose. And then we were getting all these plants like that are super high on antioxidant, just in like clove, oregano, lavender, and pomegranate. And so when we started looking into oregano's actually got a high vibration too. And we started looking at this is such an interesting thing because I didn't know this, right? Is that like they believe that when you're at an unhealthy state or you have some sort of disease, the vibration is at a certain lower level, right? Like, and not higher and lower and better or worse. It's just like kind of where it falls on the spectrum. And so when you can elevate your vibration to a certain point, that can shift you out of disease. It gives your body the energy that it needs to heal. So there's that way of looking at it. And so a lot of these plants actually help raise your vibration so that you can shift and give your body what it needs to heal. And they're also some of the highest antioxidant compounds and high ORAC compounds. So it's kind of like, you may have heard of oregano being used for the immune system. It's used a lot for bacteria and fungus and viral parasites.
It's like so hot.
It's
got like
and
a
it's like
warmth
super
to it.
pungent.
Totally,
And it's got this like a stimulating effect on the immune system. And it's like, oh, well, maybe that's another dimension to how it helps with healing of certain pathogens, especially. Is it helps like raise their vibration. It's just an interesting way to look at it, right?
I love that
It
concept.
also helps with the essential oils, of course, in it, and have been shown to like activate certain pathways, and definitely can directly suppress and balance out our microbiome, the ones that are pathogenic. So it has that too, but I just thought it was really neat. So that blend is really elevating. That's why it's called elevating.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love it. You got me on that when I started writing.
Yeah.
And with the oil and the powder. And I mean, it's ritualistic now. Like anytime I sit down to write or I have intentions to write, get the oil, rub it on my hand so I can like smell it when I'm writing, and then drink the drink. Like, man, it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that how you're using it is actually very specifically how we'd love for them to be used.
Nice.
It's less about like, oh, I'm just going to throw that in my smoothie and drink it every day, which is fine. That's one level of using them.
Right.
But really, like, you have a ritual or a ceremony around it, or something that you do on a daily basis, and you incorporate that in when you're doing it, or when you're doing a certain thing, maybe not daily, but like, weekly, or it's like that's part of the medicine and experience.
Definitely. And the word ritualistic might be scary to some people.
Yeah, totally.
But basically that's a fancy word for consciousness.
Yeah.
Right. That's just you're consciously doing something, right? When we create ritual around something, that's like a fun way to consciously do something, right? We say a prayer, we do a chant, we have a song.
It's calling in energy.
Yeah. Right. So
or creating space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people hear ritual and it's like,
I love ritual. Like that's one of my favorite words. Like,
witchy.
let's create a ritual around it. That's
Totally.
systems and processes. That's like a non-corporate way for me to say systems and processes,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
I've got like 20 years of corporate behind me, right? So I've got like, corporate Adam was what I like to call him, and I'm moving away from corporate Adam. But like we talked about anxiety, right? Corporate Adam still has a place in Adam's life. He got him here for a reason, and so I need to find ways to entertain and appease corporate Adam while I'm still growing spiritual Adam. And so those are those ways that I find that correlation between like, this cool spiritual term. Okay, that's a way I can relate it back to this corporate life. Okay, cool. I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right thing.
I like it. It's creating structure around
exactly.
something that you do, right?
Definitely.
Or a system. I like that. That's exactly
systems and processes.
Totally.
That's what we live on.
So the other thing about EOS healing that's really neat, and we're still in process of unfolding this part of it, but it was never meant to be just a products-based company. Even though we put all this intention, and they're really meant to be multidimensional products.
Beautiful packaging and all the stuff, yeah.
And we really want to move into like really truly sustainable packaging too. That's in our longer term vision, that can be composted or like is like recycled and all that, because it's like the whole thing we want to like feel really good, right? Like everywhere from we source from to like the packaging it's in to how it's consumed. We've even talked, it's so interesting, just a little side note. We've even talked about, crystals in their physical form are still being mined from the earth, right?
Sometimes in a very negative way.
Yeah,
totally.
there's unsustainable and there's sustainable practices around that, just
definitely.
like everything else, right? So being able to actually, what we do is we charge the product. They don't have ground up crystals. Some people think that, like they'll be like, oh, are there crystals in here? I'm like, no. It's literally putting the crystals around the product once we've created it to charge.
Yeah.
Because they have an energy field. And that gets into like this whole level that some people, it's like, whoa, okay, check out. No.
Yeah. But, that's where I start sliding my chair up. I'm like, oh, what do you got?
Exactly.
What's this energy field you're talking about?
Me too. But I'm always like, yeah, there's going to be people like, whoop.
Yeah, know your audience,
but
right?
I mean, there's measurable things about this for sure.
Definitely,
but I mean, we use crystals in technology.
Right.
That's the other thing. My
business
business
phones
partner
and everything.
reminds me of that all the time. I'm like, oh yeah, they totally do, because they conduct energy in certain ways, right?
Yeah.
So, if you have certain stone, if you've ever had that experience of holding a stone in your hand, you told the story of the turquoise when you first held it.
Yeah,
I thought that was beautiful. Where you just are like, oh, this feels good. Like whether or not you can explain why or what it is or what it does. But when you add a level of understanding the energies of them and what they hold potentially, you can like choose very specifically, and then you have that intention around them, and it actually, like the plants and the crystals kind of like they intermingle, their energies do, and it can kind of up level it. And it's one of those things where I would love for there to be like kind of some kind of steady situation down the road where we are like blind. If someone who's attuned to these things can tell the difference between one that was charged and one wasn't charged, you know?
Yeah, most definitely.
And there's that whole aspect of what you just said about food, of being able to bless the food or ask for it to like, to give gratitude and ask for it to nourish and support your well-being, or give gratitude that it does that. So there's also that aspect of using any product, whether it's been charged or not, where you can add your own level of charging it, if you want to call it that, of using your consciousness to elevate its consciousness or acknowledge its consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this whole, so we have that, but then we have this method that's just really more about tuning into your own inner guidance.
Okay.
And that's a lot of it. I mentioned how passionate I am about empowering people in their own health and well-being.
Right.
Even, when it comes to like coming to me for advice on what herbs to take or what to support, I'm totally happy to do that. And I also really want people to use what's going to feel most resonant to them, or if they've learned about something and they're really excited to try it, then I'm like, great, let's incorporate that in. Or how about you just try that for a while and see how that feels in your body? And, like not just saying, I know, so therefore take these things, right?
Totally.
I don't want to disempower. And I also think one of the things about herbal medicine that's so lovely is that it's so available. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can literally grow it yourself.
Right, totally.
Or go out in the woods and harvest it. And once you know.
Yeah.
And they can never take that away from us. Mm-hmm. The FDA is trying to control compounds all the time. Oh, you can't sell this or you can't sell that, or we want to regulate this, or we're going to, but the truth is like, they can never take nettle away if you can go out in the woods and you can harvest it. Right?
Nettle's one of my favorite decongestants.
Yeah,
I mean, Jesus Christ.
Exactly. Yeah. Antihistamine.
Right.
It's high in minerals. It's like super nutritious.
Yep.
And it grows wild here in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, it used to sting my ankles all the time. Yeah, totally. And I was astounded when I found out that was a thing that was good for you. I'm
I know.
Oh, all right.
I love to. I'll be like, do you know nettle? And they'll be like, no. And I'm like, stinging. Oh, stinging nettle.
Yeah, right.
Like, and I'm like, they're like, you can take that. And I'm like, yes, I promise you can consume that. Let me tell you how.
Tongue? Like, okay. Sit down. We got a conversation to have.
Yeah, exactly. I promise you that if you do these things to it, it'll take away the sting, and it's not gonna. I know, but I love that people's like stinging nettle, Same with Devil's Club,
Devil's Club. Oh yeah,
we use that one medicinally too. Yep. And people are like, "Whoa, I've come across that in the woods."
Yep, I've actually got a big tincture of that downstairs.
Yeah,
good stuff.
It is good stuff.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. So we have this like more like attunement meditation we're calling the EOS healing method that we help guide people through, but they can learn about it on their own. It's really about, the first phase is attune. So it's attuning to your own inner guidance. It's settling into your body. Right. It's settling into your breath, whatever that like, if you're a meditator, then you have your own process of getting centered in yourself, right?
Yeah, totally.
And then the next phase is receiving. So it's really like opening up your receptivity to what's available information.
Right.
So how you were having that conversation in your head. I mean, literally some people would just be like, I don't, either they wouldn't hear it.
Change the channel.
Yeah. Or they're like, let's move on. This is weird. But really it's about opening yourself up to like guidance that comes through, whether it's from your own brain, because you're finally quiet enough to hear it and listen, or listening to your body's wisdom. Mm-hmm. And that's where like individual experiences can come into play, whatever feels best. Some people literally will feel some energy. Some people hear something. Some people will see something. Some people will like get this plant pop up in their head and they're like, I don't know why, or this message, or so being receptive. And then it's really like crafting that into a statement. Sometimes it's a song. Different people have different, that's really like about, we're calling empowerment. So,
oh, cool.
So with the IN.
Yeah.
So like in coming from you, you're feeling this sense of like, this is what I want to shift in my life, or this is what I'm calling more in my life.
Right.
And then you can utilize the oils or the products, the internal products or the sprays we have, or things like that to like bring a ritual element to that statement that you're working with.
Yeah.
I
love that.
So that's one aspect that we are working on sharing more broadly when I have my new space for Herban Wellness, which I hope to be able to guide people through that if it feels like in a consultation, something to help them drop in and access their own inner wisdom and guidance is something that I would love to be able to share with people more. Yeah. If and when they're ready, or they're looking for that, or they really want that level of intentionality. Mm-hmm. So that's another layer of like how it's meant to be a products and solutions based company to really generate healing, true healing, like on multi levels.
Man, and that's a whole nother level of, it's not even the product anymore, right? It's that in power, like you said, because we have it inside of us, right? We do. The intuition, right? That intuitiveness, that atrophied muscle that we've been told not to pay attention to. I've talked about this before, but, growing up in the South in the 80s and 90s, intuition, it was such a double-edged sword because, as a male in the South, we're trust your gut. trust your gut, right? But then everything else, every other intuition is taught as witchery or feminine, right?
Interesting.
Right? And so it's like, you're not supposed to have visions. That's a witchy thing. That's a feminine thing, right? And like there's all these dichotomies that you're working against. So you're like, you're feeling a thing and told not to feel it. You're sensing a thing and told not to sense it, And so I'm finally to a point now where I'm like, hey, is there feeling left in there? Like, what's going on? Like I can sense things, but now it's like, okay, how do I work this muscle out? Because I know it's in there. And that's scary, because to trust your intuition is to put faith into something that you've abandoned. Right. And so that muscle is going to fail you a few times. Like it's atrophied, right? It hasn't been used in a while. So you're working against yourself to trust something that you've decided not to trust. But to strengthen that muscle, you got to put trust into it. And to get that muscle strong, you're gonna have to fall on your face a couple times, and it's gonna lead you the wrong way. But you got to have that knowing with the G that you're moving in the right direction. You're doing something right, and get that muscle strong enough so that you can trust it, and then it's gonna hold on to you, and it's gonna keep you safe, right? And so what you're doing with that is that's beautiful, because you're giving that assistance to something that is very much an internal job, but if we can add some guidance to that is, I mean, that's just beautiful. So good for you. That's a whole nother layer outside of it's not just a product.
Right.
It's a lifestyle.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what it's meant to be. And ultimately, our big picture vision is to be part of a wellness center.
Yeah.
At some point where we have a lot of people and shared vision around that, so that, whatever modality or form is what's being called for somebody, they have access to it too. Right.
It's so funny. I was just approached by a friend of mine who, he's a clinical psychologist, went to UW, got his degree, finished up at Bastyr. And so he's got like that cool two-sided, he's got like the very Western UW degree, and he's got like the more esoteric, Bastyr degree. And he's a spiritual person as well. And he approached me not too long ago. He has this big idea of opening a big wellness center that is encompassing to all forms of wellness, right? Not just Western, not just Eastern, but all encompassing and affordable, right? Not
that's the thing.
That's the thing, right? And so
how does it not become a privileged medicine, right?
Definitely. And that's where a lot of this starts to come in. Is we. And I use the collective we, not you and I, but we tend to forget that sometimes the ability to be a spiritual person does rely on the fact of having your basic needs met, right? If you're running from job to job to job, you have 4 jobs and you have 3 kids, and you don't know where your next paycheck's coming from or how they're going to go to school or whatever that is, you don't have time to focus on your spirituality. I mean, if you do, good for you. It's a huge heart you got there, but don't discount yourself that you're not a spiritual person because you don't have time for it. Totally. Right? Because there's a lot of that goes into that, and it's not like a privilege type thing, but there is an aspect to it that because we are in a materialistic capitalistic world, if we don't have certain things, then our ego is damaged, right? And so if we're still holding on to that egoic understanding of life, that's going to be your catalyst for what makes you happy and not happy. So, and that again, that's a privilege, because that ego is there for a reason. It shows itself up. It has to be strong. It has to be abusive and absurd at times, to get what it needs, because it's trying its hardest to protect you as a human
and to survive.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, I think when you were saying that, totally, I think one of the things why mindfulness and mindfulness practices have like spoken to so many people is because on that level, even if you don't have time to like do this deeper spiritual learning or work right now in your life, if someone's in this scenario you were just talking about, there's that level of being able to like take some deep breaths during the day and like feel your feet on the earth. Definitely. And like you can always do that, right? Like there's ways that you can like connect to at least like, okay, I'm feeling like I just don't have any time in my day to set aside, but I do have like the ability to wait, do I want to respond in that way right now? Am I going to respond differently in this way?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting with stress, because stress is so much about how we perceive. It's almost 100% how we perceive something. It
is, most definitely.
I don't want to say totally 100% because, there's situations that are literally like really stressful on the body, but it's like how we perceive the stress is just as powerful. It will cause the same stress response if you think something.
Oh, that's
as if you're actually experiencing it.
Yep.
They've shown that. So it's like, I think of that myself because stress is one of the biggest things I contend with.
Right.
Adrenal gland fatigue, or just like, you know, my managing of running a business and like my
employees
work-life
and all
balance.
kinds. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I have to like stop and check myself sometimes and be like, okay, I could perceive this as a really stressful moment,
right?
But does it have to like affect my body this much?
Right.
Like, probably not.
Right. Yeah.
If I zoom out a little bit and I'm like, okay, take some breaths, big picture.
Yes.
Is this really worth getting this worked up about?
Right. Yeah. Totally. God.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah. I find myself, I'm getting better about this practice, but I find myself, especially coming out of my corporate days, practicing arguments in my head a lot, you know? I have a point and I'm very strong about that point. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I counter somebody with a counterpoint? How would I encounter that conversation? And so my head, the way it's designed is I go through those conversations. And now knowing that I'm putting myself in a stressful situation, my body receives that as me actually having that conversation and being in that verbal altercation, let's call it. Your
heart rate goes up.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I'm not even having the conversation, but I'm experiencing all the effects of it. So now my practice, I read a book a while ago by a guy named Kamal Ravikant. It's called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And so it's a great book. And so when I get in those moments now, the practice I have is, okay, I'm aware I'm in that moment. I inhale and I say, I love myself. And I exhale and I say, thank you. And I try to do that 10 times. And if I have a mirror, I'll look at myself in the eyes and do it just to really get into myself and say, hey, look, dude, you're cool, man. Stop this wherever you're at. You're not there. You don't need to be there. You're right here. Look at yourself in the eyes. Love yourself. Right. And so it's not perfect. That. It doesn't work every time, but it gets me at least to a conscious point of knowing that, okay, hey, now that you're having this conversation with yourself, the negative effects of it. You're choosing to stay in this realm. Is this really where you want to be at?
Right.
Is this where you want to spend your time right now? Nah, dude. Go write a book. Go read a book. Go do something. Go walk your dog. Jesus Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great tool.
Yeah.
It's a really
love that one. Yeah, definitely.
Bringing that consciousness in.
It is, and like you said, zooming out, right? Because we get so stuck in the problem in hand or the mind thought that we're not conscious anymore, right? And when you take that step back, then your consciousness has an ability to look at the way the mind is handling the situation and be like, hey, okay, cool, good job, but, or hey, yes, continue on. But it gives you that ability to have that zoomed out view and that consciousness of saying, okay, let's take over again. Okay, we're out of our normal patterns. Let's get back into something cool. All right, let's go back at this again. Give a little reset.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We need that.
Back to the wellness center though, because I love this concept, and you were saying this friend approached you about it. I think a lot of people are yearning for, or have the same vision of having like a place where there's multiple modalities under one roof.
Right.
I think one of the things I've realized over the years, like having an herb shop, right? Is that people come in a lot and are like, are you an acupuncturist? Are you a homeopath? What are you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, let me tell you what I do. Right. That's different. And there's a lot of confusion. And even me and my path has been like, do I see a naturopath for this? Do I see an acupuncturist for this? Do I see an energy healer for this? Like where am I? And like, what would be most supportive in where I am in my healing journey, or what's coming up for me? And so my vision of the wellness center has always been like a place that you could come in and you don't have to know who you're going to see.
Right. But
there's a guide of some kind, a coach or a guide who helps kind of walk you through a process of figuring out what is your best next step.
Right.
So that, and then it's a co-creative thing. You decide ultimately where you want to start on your journey or where you want to enter into this place. But it's really like, it is about like, here's your like kind of plethora of options that address things on these levels. And it requires a practitioner to also be really willing to met maybe where their modality is really strong and where it's maybe not so strong.
Right.
So talk about ego. There's like kind of just letting that go down, right?
Yeah.
Because like, a naturopath, for example, is trained in so many different modalities, but maybe in their personal, practice of naturopathic medicine, they tend to focus in certain ways, like physical medicine, for example, or they really focus on women's health and hormones or something. So to be able to like, that's my strong area. And I have other people that work in these other areas that are more specific for that. Or someone who tends to use labs to test as a naturopath, and someone who use like muscle testing or energy testing, you know, there's just all these different like range of like personalities and approaches, and it can be overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I love choice. I think we love choice, obviously, but I think there's a point where you're just like,
there's so many choices.
Because sometimes you're like, I don't know. I don't know which is the next, like, is it food that I need to change? Do I need to take an herb? Do I need to get healing? You know?
Right, yeah,
so I love the idea of a place that helps at least sort through some of that for people.
Yeah.
So they can like, and then has lots of opportunity for teaching, like how they can like apply these in their life. Or, you know, like if you are trying to change your diet, there's a teaching kitchen, and there's nutritional coaching that's available in classes. So you can actually like, how do I eat a plant-based lifestyle healthfully?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. So I'm hopeful that lots of those will be springing up around, you know, that people will come together like that.
And you've been, I think, moving in this direction for a little while now, right? I know you've looked at some spaces, but have you found a space yet, or kind of still entertaining options?
Yeah. So for Herban Wellness, there's a couple different things in motion. Like Herban Wellness, I want to change where I'm located for my actual like retail shop, right? For Herban Wellness and her next evolution. So for me, like, it's my evolution too, like of wanting to still have a storefront, but I want to do more consulting, and I want to have like a lab space. And one of my herbalists on staff is a clinical herbalist, and she'd love to see people. She specializes in Lyme and like parasites and things, which are areas I do not have much expertise. And she's super passionate and knowledgeable about them.
Awesome.
So I think, you know, she wants to start setting up her clinical practice. She also does some shamanic work and shamanic healing. And so the idea is to have a space where we can continue how Herban Wellness is in certain respects. So people can just come in and get their refills, or get naturopaths can send in prescriptions, or we can make recommendations. But the whole conversation around boundaries earlier, so much of that is coming up in my life, and even like how I operate as a business and how I operate as a healer or herbalist and a educator in my community. I feel like I need some boundaries around how I operate. For example, like Herban Wellness is open 7 days a week. Okay. And there's set hours, but there's no way for me to control the flow. Okay. Like you called up the other day for a refill formula, and we were super busy, and I was like, no, we can't get it ready for you in an hour. It's gonna be 3 hours, you know, or whatever, just because of the flow. But it'd be awesome to have a system in place where people know easily, like, this is when I can place, this is how to place my custom orders, and this is when the times are available to pick up, or, you know, drop by and get it after hours, curbside, or whatever works, so that it's like, you know, just something that we then can like manage our time better and more efficiently. Totally. But also, I'm going to really start encouraging more and more people to actually schedule consults. So they can come in and get their stuff, that you can come in and ask a few questions and like reload on your stuff. Totally great. We'll have open store hours. But the idea is also that you could easily go online and see the online scheduler and schedule a 15-minute consult, because you just want to go a little deeper. Yeah. And then I can give my full attention. Yeah. That's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah, totally. I mean, people's feedback to me all the time is like, wow, you like really hold space well for people. You're really present with me. And I love that. But sometimes I'm like, there's 5 other people waiting to talk to me, and my eyes are kind of like, I feel it. And I'm like, I'm trying to stay really present with you. And I can feel them being like, I'm parked in a 30-minute. Right. Is she gonna be done anytime soon? Or the other day, you know, like this sweet woman, my intern was there from Bastyr, and he had someone queued up to talk to me because he didn't know how to answer a question. Okay. And like, you know, I'm like low blood sugar. I haven't eaten yet. It's like 2:30 in the afternoon. I just got done with 2 hours straight of talking to people, right? And helping people. I'm like, okay, like she's waiting. All right, I'm going to, you know, here we go. She burst into tears, and I was like, oh no. Like, I was just like, wow, like I really want to hold space for her, because I didn't know it was going to be emotional also. It made perfect sense. But I was like, I need like my reserves filled before I can like hold space for her. You know what I mean? I do. Whereas like if she'd come in and we could be like, hey, you know, Katya has a 15-minute like at 4:00 or something. You want to just schedule, and she can like sit down with you and like really go, you know, be present with you. Exactly. Totally. And the rest of the store can keep operating. Yeah. Then I feel like I can be more present. I can help people more.
Right. Yeah.
I can determine even if I can help them.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You know, or if it's something that they need, you know, more in-depth practitioner care or something around. So that's the model around urban wellness. Having a lab space for my products too. And at the same time, if I can create a lab space, we've talked about how then EOS healing products can start getting created in that environment too, because we're kind of like slowly building up to that, like actually having a dedicated commercial lab space to produce our products for EOS healing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Krissa and I, my business partner, have this vision of helping co-create an OpLife wellness center. That's what they're called.
Okay.
But that doesn't feel totally coalesced yet.
Okay. Not just still an idea that's being figured out.
We're working on ways we can start building that online.
Okay.
Just like making those connections and contacts and like building the community, but it takes a lot. I'm sure you're aware, having run and managed, you know, even yoga studios or anything like that, like all that's involved. And honestly, I don't know that I want to help run another business. I would love to be part of co-creating it.
Right.
But it's a lot.
But the day-to-day is, totally.
Yeah. So until we get to the point where we can have a full-time, like, you know, clinic manager or like wellness center manager and all that stuff, it's like, it's a big investment.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's good to know that the ideas are being worked on, but you have time to not just have to rush and knee-jerk reaction to this stuff, you know, because especially something as beautiful as that is well-intended and there's so much intention going into the idea that you have. If you rush it, it takes away from the beauty of it.
Right.
Right. You know, it's like I think the whole idea of humanity is let's slow down and pay attention a little bit more. And that's exactly the business model that you're working on. You're taking it slow. You're paying attention to what's going on. And when it's right, it's right.
And how do we make it truly sustainable for everyone involved?
Right.
And monetarily sustainable and be able to offer things to people like at a lower rate for those who need it. And, you know, it's like just having a community model of some kind, a membership model of some kind.
Yeah,
you
like
know?
almost like a co-op-y kind of thing, but not quite.
Yeah, exactly. Like an elevated co-op concept.
Definitely. And there's different ways, and that's, again, beautiful. You know, there's different ways to run our business. There's different ways to run our lives. We're stuck in a cultural norm. And so to do something different is going to be a little harder because you're not living up to whatever, but you don't have board members. You have a business partner, but it seems like you guys are on the same page. So like, let's say like a respectable quote unquote profit margin is 30%. You guys are hitting 20, right? That's fine if you're okay with that as your business model, right? You don't have to hit a corporate structure. You can do okay with where you're at. You're still paying bills. You're still monetizing whatever you need to monetize to sustain life in your own way. But do we need to make all the money and hold on to all the money and sit on all the money so nobody else can have the money? No. You know, it's out there.
We're transcending that model.
Thank you. Yes. I love that example. Thank you for that. Yes, you're living it by example.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Oh man,
that's the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have like a rough time frame? Or do you have to be out of the Kirkland location anytime, or is it still kind of like? I'm so
grateful. Actually, I know it's all about like divine timing, as I like to call it, in air quotes, right at this point, because I've been actively looking. I know the universe knows what I want. Like I feel really ready for this next change in myself.
Right.
Like I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, I feel good with where I've been, even though I love the space I've been in for 12 years and a lot of people are sad that I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'm so ready for like something new. So luckily, fortunately, gratefully, my landlords are totally willing to go month to month. And so my lease ended end of April.
Okay. So you're just kind of rolling it on as you need to.
Yeah. Cool. In previous years, I mean, it's like, this is where like you see the beauty of how things just work out the way they're meant to work out, right? In previous years, they would have been putting signs up on the building and trying to get me out of there because they want someone in before summer. They've always told me that. Like,
okay.
My lease has always been up in April and they're like, they need someone in by like May 1st kind of thing. They want me like, so that they can get traction with summer flows and all that stuff. So this year they're like, we're in COVID times.
Yeah.
You stay and pay rent as long as you want to.
That's kind of, that's kind of comforting.
It is.
You know?
Oh my gosh, such a relief.
Yeah.
Oh, like that time pressure would have been just so tough. I'm sure something would have worked out, but that would have just talk about adding stress. I would have had to work hard not to get super stressed.
Definitely.
Trusting.
Oh man.
It's all gonna work out. It's all gonna work out. Meanwhile, like someone else wants to move in,
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, ah.
Well, and it's kind of comforting in a way that even though because I'm sure the property management company that runs the building is, corporate based and they have board investors, blah, 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 all that shit.
Probably.
And, but it's kind of nice to know that as something as terrible as we've seen COVID as being, it actually, I mean, in a weird way, it's expending the humanity of that corporation to look at that as, it's still a business decision I'm sure they're making because they want to protect their bottom lines. New businesses aren't moving in, but they're allowing their humanity to step in and to look at that in a way that it affects the bottom line. But hopefully they'll see that the lesson is like, it doesn't have to be this one way. There's we can look at humanity as humans, not as, percentage points,
Totally.
and like, okay, how are we going to maximize this bottom line of this space? It's like, well, we have a beautiful human being in there that's got a great business. They're doing great things. Let's keep them in there. Let's do it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And that
so,
is actually the energy they approached it with, which I really appreciate. The property manager, he's the only person I have an interaction with. So I don't know quite how the structure is above that, but he is very we like to treat our tenants like family. We, hope maybe we'll work together again someday. So we don't want to burn bridges, kind of just we want to, we understand what you need to do for you as a business. They tried to keep me, and then it's no, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we get it.
Yeah.
But they're like, but let's do this kindly and let's do this with compassion. And I do really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely.
And when I moved into that space, was 2009. It was right at the recession.
Right in the recession. Yeah, totally.
So it's so interesting, the timing, because as a new business owner, never having owned a business before, having any business background, I don't know if I would have gotten that space if it hadn't been the timing that it was. I walked right into it. They didn't even I probably would have had competition basically from other businesses before. And so I didn't, it was
Divine timing.
it totally lined up.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is meant to be. It was just really amazing. So it's interesting that we're in this other different lull that nobody saw coming at the same time that I'm ready to make this transition. So
yeah. Wow.
I'm sure the right space will show itself eventually.
It will, and one of the things that I've been practicing is trying to get out of my own way with shit. And the way with that, I sometimes tend to let my anxiety answer the questions for me. And somebody says, hey, can we do this thing? No, sorry. But it's because I haven't been confident enough to take the time to actually hear the question, right? And give faith in the answer that it was asked to me for a reason, right? And so getting out of my own way of, let's say, the other day, we were driving and it had a flat tire. And it was flat tire, and it was, on the freeway, on the mountains. It was kind of treacherous. Kids were with me, all this shit, right? It was a blowout. And, I could have been just okay, upset. You guys stay in the car. I'm just going to dad mode this out and change this tire. But Harper, my youngest, is like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm changing the tire. Do you want to learn? Right. Oh. And so instead of me just being upset with the situation and saying, okay, I'm just going to get through this and then move on with my day, it's okay. No, this situation happened for us for a reason. And so now let's embrace this situation and see what we can get out of this, right? So she learned how to change a tire. I learned how to keep my patience while teaching my daughter how to do something while they're screaming diesels going by me on the road and shit. But it's that thing, getting out of your own way. This can be a stressful thing of where am I going to go next? Where am I going to, where is this next building going to be for me? How am I going to develop my concept? You just know it's going to happen, right? And you have that faith and that's that intuition, that muscle that we strengthened to know that we're on the right path, we're doing the right things, we're around the right people, we're making the right moves and doing it in a very pure way. Yeah. So there's almost no way that it can't work out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Get out of our own way.
Yeah. And I found this amazing realtor who's we did a manifestation meditation together. Did a mandala. I have an altar set up for the creation of this new space, and so she and I can speak that language,
I love that. That's so great. That's cool. You found a real estate agent that's meeting you where you're at.
This is perfect.
Yeah.
So she's out there looking. She's putting out the feelers.
Hell yeah.
Will check in with me and be like, Katya, I'm so sorry I haven't found a space yet. And I'm like, Lori, we know how this works.
Yep.
We both have intention. We're both looking. We're not just sitting here waiting for it to knock on our door. We're doing the things. The universe knows what we need and want. It's very clear. So it's just a matter of timing.
Yep.
I was like, I see that you're doing everything, and just check in with me and let me know what you're seeing out there. And we just went and looked at a space this morning.
Oh, cool.
Which is nice, but the parking situation's not good.
Okay. Yeah.
And if I'm going to move out of downtown Kirkland, it better have parking.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, man. Yeah. And if you want to grow that like, in-person business and making clients and stuff, yeah, totally.
So there are like 4 dedicated spots with this space, just a real quick aside.
Yeah.
But there's nowhere around to park.
Oh, Jesus.
So if I have a class and I have 20 people, where are they going to park? Literally
carpool.
At the Safeway parking lot, like across. I'm like,
Yeah.
So it's not optimal.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, we're getting closer.
There you go.
Has lots of natural light. It's definitely the right size.
Yep. Now it's got to manifest some parking.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm like, did you forget that part? Because that was really important.
I'm pretty sure that was in the top 5. Come on, spirits.
I can ride my bike there, but other people are not going to.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
I could. It's
right on.
Really close to where I live.
Very cool.
I just live down here in Juanita.
Oh, really?
Close to you.
Oh, I
was
know
like
we were
5
neighbors
minutes from here. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Oh, that's even better because that means it's going to be even closer to where I'm at now.
It will be if it's in this area. We'll see.
Oh, very cool. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, the questionnaire that I sent you, you had answered one of these questions in like the most beautiful way I had ever heard, and I asked you topics around conversation, and what's exciting you about life right now? The potential shift of consciousness in our planet, empowering people to take control of their own health and well-being. And I mean, we've talked about that at like a lot, but just that concept in general, like it's just such a beautiful thing for a human to say, you know, and that is that whole 1%, right? Because it's not an individualized thought. That is a thought for the consciousness of humanity.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, and if you can just think of like how strong that thought is, just the concept of that thought. And if you have 1% of 8 billion people thinking that one way. Like there's studies that have shown meditation circles,
Yes.
where I think it was in the 70s, there was like a group of like, I think it was like 1,000 people that meditated about world peace. And there was actually a statistic showing that worldwide violence had actually dropped a significant percentage that year. Not because, we can't say because of, but you know, there's correlations between that, right? And so, I mean, hell, we talked about Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, the documentary on Netflix, and there are the fifth kind is where we start to reach out to aliens and have them contact us, and those are done through meditative circles that
they communicate that way.
Totally, right?
They communicate in thought forms.
Yeah. Yeah.
They communicate. They respond to our consciousness.
Right.
And
so
that they're benevolent.
Yeah. And they're wanting to help. They're wanting to.
And if they traveled here,
there's
their
a reason.
consciousness is a little bit ahead of ours.
Yeah, definitely. There's I won't even paraphrase it. I'll just tell you to read it. There's a guy named Charles Eisenstein, and he's got a bunch of books out, and the latest book that he wrote is called "The Beautiful Earth That We Know Can Exist," something like that.
I need to read that.
It's beautiful, and at the very back of the book, there's a story that he tells. And it's probably one of the most profound stories I've ever read in my life, and it gives me so much hope for humanity. And you know, not like a myth. I'd say it's a myth. You know, there's you could take factualness from it. You can say it's all bullshit. You know, but there's definitely there's modicums of factfulness that could be there. You know, within all the stories that we've created through religion and spirituality. But it just really is a really encompassing hey, here's a vision of why we might be here, and some of the struggles that we're going through, and the reason why we're going through those struggles, and how we can get through that shit. You know, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. So yeah, check out that book. I'll leave the link in the show notes.
Please do.
But
I would love to check that out. Yeah, because that statement that you just read off and how I feel about being here now, I would say that it's the thing that gets me through.
Yeah.
Like, I do believe I'm here to help with that shift. Otherwise, all this wouldn't be worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
for myself as a soul, yes, my evolution, my personal evolution, but it's really about the collective.
It is.
Evolution.
It is.
And through the collective, we are our own personal evolution is happening, but it's this collective evolution. And, like I mentioned, the earth connection, like I have just a really strong, deep earth connection.
Yeah.
And I see that the earth is a living being, right? She is also evolving.
Yeah.
And that's why we can all collectively evolve at this time.
Right.
It's like on this planet, she's provided this space for us to go through this experience, right? And to go through her own growth and process. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, that's the thing that gets me through when I'm having a really hard time. It's like, oh, but this isn't just about me, Yeah. This is about all of us and this evolution that's happening. So yeah, I mean, if I can impact people in some small way, but it's also like, I do believe truly that when we do our own work and we do evolve and grow in ourselves, we do energetically impact others and we energetically impact the field, like we were talking about. I do believe that that is valuable in and of itself.
Yeah, most definitely.
And, we show up in the ways that we're called to show up, and that is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and it's at those little ripple effects because just like you said, that path that put you on, right? You've been on it since you were, a child, appreciating Mother Earth and all this stuff, not realizing the effects that had an effect on me, right? I would not be sitting here with you if I hadn't had that experience with you in your shop where you took the time to talk to me about my own personal well-being and give me advice to move on, right? And that's lineage history that you've been working on for decades before we even met, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's not even like a faith thing. It's, you're doing the right thing for you, right? And that's not just a selfish right thing for me. That's not an egotistic thing, but that's like, you're doing what's right for you because you feel that intrinsically through humanity. And that knowledge that you've been gaining, you never know when it's going to affect somebody.
Right.
But here you go. It's affected me, right? And it's affected Monica, and it's affected now multiple people in my life because I've been able to share the knowledge you've given me with other people that I know, right? With just the modicums of knowledge that you've given me, right? You've had depth of that knowledge. But, through that, that's been able to impact people in my life. Now, so that knowledge that you have has now easily affected probably at least 24 people I can think of off the top of my head. And that's my own personal experience with you in the 1/12 of a year that the 12 years that you've been open. I can only imagine how many people you've affected and you've impacted from the knowledge that you have, right? And that you're living your truth. And when we live our truth, it's just going to make everything so much more beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
It's always really nice to hear that reflected back.
Definitely.
To remember.
Yeah. We're doing it right,
Right.
It's a hard path, man. It is. It's a tough one, especially when it's not cultural norm, but
Absolutely.
That's where we find our communities.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that we keep coming back to that community word,
Yep. Coming together. Yep.
Definitely.
With a common vision, common goal, whether it's different facets,
Yeah.
which
Definitely.
I think is really beautiful too.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too.
And when you do get your new space, I'd love to come back and actually maybe do a remote one from your space.
Yeah, that'd
Get your
be
business partner in there. We'll talk about the EOS line, what you guys are working on.
Yeah.
Hopefully you got a lab and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
yeah,
What a pleasure.
definitely. It's been a
We
pleasure.
talked about so many wonderful things
man.
that are near and dear to my heart.
Yes. Definitely filled my cup for the day.
Yes.
And thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
I look forward to having you on again.
Wonderful.
All right. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye. All right. Thanks so much for joining us today. Love that conversation with Katya. If you have any questions about what we talked about, you can check out the show notes. If you like the podcast, please subscribe to it in whatever platform you're listening to. And if you like it, share it with a friend, man. I love sharing good conversations with cool people. So if you think this conversation is going to be impactful for somebody in their life, please send it on over to them. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Obeisance to you all.